Revision of operations with fractions. Let's get straight into it here. We want to add 3/5 plus 4/5. So these already have a common denominator, which makes it very easy to add. If they have the same denominator, then you can simply add the numerators, and that will give you the answer. So 3/5 plus 4/5, we're simply going to add these top numerators here. So 3 plus 4 is 7, so our answer is 7/5. If the question is given to you in mixed numbers, then you answer in mixed numbers. If it's given to you as an improper fraction, which is right here, then you can answer as an improper fraction. We'll go ahead for the exercise and change this. So this is an improper fraction, which means that the number in the numerator is greater than the number in the denominator. All right, so there's more than 5/5 in this number right here. So 7/5, we can rewrite that as 5/5, plus there's also, we need 2 more of those fifths. And 5/5 is 1, 2/5 is just 2/5. So 7/5 is also 1 and 2/5. So here's a mixed number, because here's an integer and here's a fraction. That's why we call it a mixed number. And this guy here is improper, again, because the numerator is larger than the denominator. Adding 3/7 plus 1/7, the denominators are the same, so we add the numerators. 3 plus 1 is 4, so that we can write 4/7. We don't have to change anything there because the 4 is less than the 7. Let's calculate 3/4 of 48. In this case, of this value simply means that we can take the fraction and multiply it by this number. So 3/4 of 48, we can figure out by doing 3/4 times 48. And 48, we can write that as 48 over 1, if we want to, right? 48 divided by 1 is 48. So in this case, we can multiply these, and we can simplify ahead of time, because on the diagonals, we see 3 and 1 can't do anything there. 4 and 48, both of these can be divided by 4. Of course, we can divide 4 by 4 to get 1, and we can divide 48 by 4 to get 12. So that makes it a little bit simpler to multiply these numbers together. So if they're on the diagonals, you can simplify. 3 times 12, that's the numerator, we get 36. And 1 times 1 now is the denominator. And 36 divided by 1, we just write as 36. Let's calculate 3/5 of 32. So again, it's the fraction times the whole number. And then 32, if we want, we can write it as 32 over 1. 3 times 32 is 96. You'll note that I didn't cancel anything on the diagonals because I couldn't. I can't simplify 5 and 32 or 3 and 1. The denominator here is 5 times 1, so that's 5. Okay, so 96 over 5. 96 is definitely far greater than 5. So let's take this improper fraction and make it a mixed number. So what we need to figure out is how many times does 5 go into 96? Quite a few. And 19 times 5 would give us 95. 19 times 5, I write that over here, 19 times 5 will give us 95. All right? So that means that the number 19 is 5/5 written 19 times, and that makes 95, but we need 96, so we're left with 1/5. So 96 over 5 is the same as 19 and 1/5, and that is 3/5 of 32. Multiplying values, we simply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. And if you can simplify either with the diagonals or after you've done your calculation, then you need to go ahead and do so. It always needs to be in its most simplest form. Here, this requires one extra step. So 1.5 is the same as 1, if I'm using a denominator of 2, is 2 over 2. And 1 over 2. So 1.5, I can rewrite as 2 over 2 plus 1 over 2. And I'm still multiplying that number by 2/5. Well, 2 over 2 plus 1 over 2 is 3 over 2. So 1.5 is 3/2. Multiply that by 2/5. We now need to multiply, but we can simplify these first because the 2 can be divided by 2 to get 1. This 2 also divided by 2 to also give us 1. So now we have in the numerator position 3 times 1, which gives us 3. And the denominator, we have 1 times 5, which gives us 5. So 1.5 times 2/5 gives us 3/5. Further review, 3/7 divided by 3/4. When we divide by a fraction, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. The reciprocal is simply flipping this number. Okay, so the reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3. Right, so 3/7 divided by 3/4 is the same thing as 3/7 times 4/3. We flip the fraction. Now we can simplify. There's a 3 here and a 3 here. The diagonals both have 3's. Divide by 3, get 1. Divide by 3, get 1. And now it's just a simple process of 1 times 4 is 4, and 7 times 1 is 7. All right, here we go. Now we need to change the mixed number into an improper fraction and then multiply by the reciprocal. So there's a few steps in this one. 1 and 4/3. Okay, 1 is 4/4. And 3/4 is 3/4. So 4/4 plus 3/4 is 7/4. There's a quick way to get that. If you take the 1, the large one, you multiply by the denominator, that gives us 4. And then you add 3, that gives us 7. You write that number over the denominator, and that gives us the same thing. So 1 and 3/4 is actually 7/4. Divided by 4/5, that's times the reciprocal, which is 5/4. Now we can simply multiply. So 3 times 5 is 35, and 4 times 4 is 16. This is an improper fraction, so let's figure out how many times does 16 go into 35? Twice. Okay, so there's 2. 2, which is the same as 16 over 16 plus 16 over 16. And that would be 32 of those. And we need 35, which means that there are 3 left. So 2 and 3/16. And just to make sure that we know what's happening here, all we simply did here was 35 over 16. That's the same as 16 over 16 plus 16 over 16. Okay, that's 1 and 2. That's where the large 2 came from. And 16 plus 16 is 32, but we need to have 35. And so then we also have the remaining 3/16. So this number is the same as this number. And this number can be rewritten here, 2 and 3/16.